You said that you knew Brooke Page when she was in high school. Was that around the time that your family and Brooke's family reconnected?
I think she graduated after, no, she graduated before. My son graduated in 2017. So from 2017, her brother and my son graduated together. They played football, baseball together as children.
So since that time frame is when the two families came together and you had this close relationship that you described?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Do you know Aria Page?
Yes, ma'am.
And how did you know Aria?
Aria was Brooke and Justice's daughter.
Can you describe for the jury what kind of relationship you had with Aria, Rhonda?
I loved her like she was my own. I was there for baby showers, weddings of Brooke and Justice. I gravitated to her just like I would any baby.
And during the course of the dinners and vacations and things that you've described that you did with this family, would you spend time with Aria during those events as well?
Absolutely.
Let's move forward to Miss Stacy Pascal. How do you know Stacy Pascal?
I nannied for her 3 children.
How did that come to be that you became her nanny?
Her nanny up and quit working for her without a notice. And I had several people call me and ask me if I would consider nannying for her. Just in one day, 2 or 3 people called me. And I told her that I would have to think about it and that I would call her within a few days.
At that time, had you been on a little bit of a hiatus from nannying, meaning had you stopped doing that for a little while?
Yes.
Okay. So it sounds as though Miss Pascal reached out to you to do those services for her. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you actually eventually start watching her children?
Yes, ma'am.
How did that come about? Did Stacy, let me back up, did Stacy vet you in any fashion to make sure you would be okay and a good fit with her kids?
She called me and asked me. We talked about, the days, how long of days, and then just talked over the phone. And then I eventually went to her house and talked with her and her husband, sit down with her and her husband and her children, and I got to know them on a personal, on a level that a nanny would know them, and gravitated to them. They liked me, and that was. I'm
sorry, go ahead.
That's what I loved about them, because they gravitated to me. They didn't know me. They were older. So,
Did that visit with them lead to you serving as their nanny?
Yes, ma'am.
And do you remember when you started watching Stacy Pascal's children?
Late February, maybe early March.
And would that have been of last year, 2023?
Yes, ma'am.
When you first started watching them, what days were you keeping them?
Mondays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays.
And where would you keep those children?
I would drive to her house from my house.
Sometimes when you arrived, were the children awake?
Not always.
And so sometimes they were sleeping and sometimes they were awake?
Yes, ma'am.
After you began keeping Stacy's children, did Brooke contact you about keeping Aria for her?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you recall when that was?
Late May, early June, somewhere in there.
Of last year?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so 2023?
Yes, ma'am.
When Brooke reached out to you about keeping Aria, did you immediately say yes, or did you have to check on that?
No, I was working for Stacy, and I said I would have to talk to Stacy because I kept, them at her house. So I would have to, confer with her to see if it was okay. And so, but I would get back with her.
And I assume that Stacy said it was okay for you to keep Aria at her house?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Do you recall whenever you started keeping Aria, what days of the week you kept her initially?
Mondays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays.
And at that time, did those days line up generally with the days that you were keeping Stacy's children?
Yes, ma'am.
Were there ever schedule changes where you would sometimes have Aria and not have Stacy's children?
Yes, ma'am.
Were there ever schedule changes where sometimes you would have Stacy's children and not Aria?
Yes, ma'am.
So initially back in, I think you said late May, early June, you're keeping Stacy's twins, sometimes her daughter, and then you would have Aria as well.
Yes, ma'am.
And so generally at that time, you're having the twins and Aria those 3 days a week that you told us, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And shortly after, starting to keep Aria those 3 days a week, did that schedule change?
Yes, ma'am. Brooke asked me if her her mother-in-law, Miss Page, went on some kind of leave from work, workman's comp, and wanted to know if Miss Page could keep her on Thursdays. Would I mind?
And when you say Miss Page, are you speaking of Pamela Page?
Yes, ma'am.
And so it sounds as though Brooke is telling you that she would like to keep her on Thursday, and I think you said if you would mind.
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean by that?
She didn't want to interfere with her paying me to keep a child, and I said that's fine. That's between you two. Whatever you want to do, this is fine with me.
Okay. So you had no opposition to?
Oh, no, ma'am.
To Brooke letting Aria spend time with her
Yes,
grandmother.
ma'am.
Okay. During this time frame, as the schedule is starting to change, and I apologize, when did you say that happened after you started keeping Aria?
I had Aria about 3 weeks when she asked me this.
Okay. So sometime mid to late June, the schedule changed. Is that fair to say?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Around this time frame, what's going on in your life in particular, or in general, I should say?
Objection, relevance.
How is that relevant?
Your Honor, can we approach? No. It was testified into, on the interview, Detective Doherty asked Ms. Jewell about the things that were going on in her life, and that's what I'm trying to follow up on.
Okay, overruled.
Thank you. So can you describe for the jury kind of what's going on in general with your kids and your family situation?
My daughter just graduated high school, so we went through the whole graduation. We were moving her to college in Gainesville, and then we were scheduled to go in August to England for a baton twirling competition with her.
Is that the trip that was referenced when you were speaking with Detective Doherty on the interview
Yes,
earlier?
ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
And I think you guys are scheduled to leave for that early August?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Would that have been the first time you guys would have been out of the country?
Yes, ma'am.
So kind of a big situation for you guys.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Moving forward to the time frame around July 19th. July 19th was a Wednesday, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Let's talk about the couple of weeks leading up to that situation and your schedules with the children, okay? Around that time frame, had Stacy Pascal changed your days in any fashion as to when you would keep her twins?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you explain to the jury what was going on there?
So I had the twins and their daughter usually on Monday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. Her husband's schedule had changed, his job, and so he would work night shift and he would work day shift, and so he would be sleeping, and so she would call me ahead of time and say, hey, I don't need you to keep the boys. My husband's going to be home sleeping. My oldest daughter's going to keep him occupied until he gets up. So that schedule had changed within that 2 week span.
On the week of July 19th, did you keep, or the week including July 19th rather, did you keep the twins or their sister on Monday?
I did not.
And why was that?
She had called me and told me that she didn't need me there.
Objection, Your Honor, hearsay.
It is, but I'll allow her for context. Go ahead.
Thank you.
She called and told me that Kelly had off and that she did not need my services that day. So I didn't work.
Did you keep Aria that day on Monday?
I did.
And can you describe for the jury, usually whenever you kept Aria, how you would pick her up or how you would come to have her?
I would pick her up in the mornings between 8 and 8:30, depending on what time I needed to be at the Pascal's house. And I would pick her up and take her to the Pascal's house.
And usually when you would pick her up, how would Aria come to be in your vehicle?
I would pull up at Brooke Page's house and she would put her in the car and buckle her up and put her diaper bag below the car seat.
And where was the car seat usually located in your vehicle?
On the back passenger side.
So in the back seat?
Yes, ma'am.
Was Aria's car seat forward facing or rear facing at that time?
It was rear facing.
And usually when you would have Aria and then you would go to Stacy's house, what would you do with Aria when you got there to Stacy's house?
I would take her out, get her out in her car, the whole car seat, the diaper bag, take her inside. And then as I approached the inside, I would take her out of her car seat. I would place a blanket on the floor because she was crawling. And I would give her toys from the twins, like soft toys for her to play with. And put her on the floor to play with her and engage with her. And the twins loved her too. So they would get down in the floor and play with her as well as her daughter.
On this particular Monday of the week, including July 19th, you testified a few minutes ago that you did not have the twins on that day.
Yes,
Do you recall picking up Aria on that day?
Yes, ma'am.
And what did you do with Aria that day?
I picked her up and I met my daughter and we went to Hardee's and ate breakfast. Me and my daughter, Aria, still drinking a bottle. So we engaged with her. We was there for an hour, just killing time. An hour and a half, just sitting and chit-chatting because she's got so much going on her life. We just was catching up, me and my daughter.
After you got done with breakfast with your daughter, did you run errands that day?
I did, yes, ma'am.
And then did you end up at a friend of yours' house?
Objection, Judge. Relevance.
I think it goes to show the schedule changes that are going on around that time frame, Your Honor.
Okay, let's move on though, but gotcha.
Thank you, Your Honor. Did Brooke Page pick Aria up from you that day?
Yes, ma'am.
And did she go to your friend's house to do that?
Yes, ma'am. After I run errands and my errands for the day, I went to my friend's house and Brooke had picked her up from there.
Backtracking to the Wednesday before that,
Yes, ma'am.
that Wednesday, generally, you would have had the twins and Aria, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you recall if you had the twins on that day?
I did not.
And did you have Aria that day?
Objection again, Your Honor.
I'm gonna
Relevance.
sustain it. You're losing me. Try giving me some numbers for dates
Sure,
instead
yes,
of.
sir, yes, sir. So on the Wednesday before July 19th, which would have been July 12th,
Yes, ma'am.
you said you did not have the twins, correct?
Objection again, Your Honor. Relevance.
I'm gonna sustain that. We're getting a little far afield.
Yes, sir. So going back to the Monday that we've been talking about, the 19th, for the record, that would have been the 17th of July, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Judge. Again, I will object because now we're going back to the 17th rather than the 19th.
Okay, well, we're at the 17th. Let's
Yes,
go.
sir.
Okay.
I was simply trying to provide.
Overruled,
Thank you.
overruled.
I was just trying to provide a court date as the judge requested. So let's move forward to the 19th,
Yes, ma'am.
okay? So on that particular day, were you scheduled to keep both Aria and the twins?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Had you been asked to arrive at the Pascal home earlier than usual?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you ever discuss with Brooke Page that arrival change?
Yes, ma'am.
Was she aware that you were coming to pick Aria up early that day?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. In the past, had you sometimes talked with Brooke about the fact that the time changes of when you had to be there at Stacy's home were irritating to you?
Yes, ma'am.
Objection, Your Honor. Leading in relevance.
It is leading. I'll sustain it on that basis.
Had you had conversations with Brooke in the past that were venting in nature regarding things of the way Stacy did?
Same objection, Judge.
Your Honor, I think it goes directly to the...
Overruled.
Thank you. Had you had those conversations in the past?
Yes, ma'am.
Was this something that you would talk to Brooke about in a friendly capacity?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So on this particular morning, did you go to Ariah's house, to Brooke and Justice's house, to pick up Ariah?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you describe for us what happened when you got there?
I had text Brooke or more, talked in my phone to Brooke that I would be there in a few minutes. And so Brooke always brings the baby out, opens the door and puts her buckles her up and puts her diaper bag in the floor up underneath her car seat.
And is that what Brooke did on that particular day?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Did you talk to Brooke at that time frame?
I was in the driver's seat and she opened up the door and we was just chit-chatting that way.
Was that a brief conversation with her?
Yes, ma'am.
When you left Brooke's, where were you going?
To Stacy Pascal's house.
As you're driving, what are you thinking about, if you remember?
Getting to Stacy's house and being there on time because she had asked me to be there so she could leave by 8:15 before the boys got up.
Was she trying to avoid having to deal with her sons that morning?
Yes, ma'am.
Objection, Judge. Speculative.
Sustained.
If the boys were awake when Stacy left, would it usually take her longer to get out the door?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So as you're driving, you told us a little bit about what you were thinking. Did you think about making any stops?
Yes, ma'am. I was going to pull through Burger King and get breakfast for the twins and their oldest sister.
At that point, would you have been looking for breakfast for Aria from the Burger King?
No, ma'am, because she was still drinking a bottle.
Okay. Was she also eating baby food of some sort at that time?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. But nothing table food?
No, ma'am.
So did you actually stop at the Burger King?
I was stopped at the red light right there at the crossing and noticed that there was a long line at Burger King, and I knew that I would not be able to get through the line and be at work on time.
So what did you do?
So I just bypassed Burger King and went to Stacy's house.
Okay. And where is Stacy's house located?
I call it McClenny 2. I don't know the address.
Okay. So basically, you enter into McClenny to near just past the Burger King, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. What happened when you got to Stacy's?
I got there and I grabbed my water bottle, my cup, and I had my lunch in the little tray right there where the cup holder is, and I grabbed it. My phone was right there as well, and I grabbed it, got out of the car to get to the inside before 8:15 so she could leave. She didn't want to leave while the kids were, she didn't want them up. She wanted them asleep so she could get out and she wouldn't be late. And that's what I was thinking is get there on time before they got up.
When you got out of the car, Rhonda, did you get Aria out of the car?
No, ma'am, I forgot I had her.
When you went inside, did you talk to Stacy?
For a brief minute.
Do you remember what you guys talked about?
Just one of the boys had failed the night before, and she was worried that it had bruised, and she wanted me to take a picture and send it to her. And we had talked about my doctor's appointment the next day, and was it.
As you're talking about the doctor's appointment the next day, are you talking with Stacy about the fact that you can't work the next day?
Yes, ma'am.
Leading, Your Honor, objection.
Sustained.
Had you had a conversation with Stacy about your unavailability on Thursday?
Yes, ma'am.
And why were you not going to be available?
Because I have.
Objection, Your Honor, relevance.
How is that relevant?
Your Honor, it goes to the schedule changes and the things that Ms. Jewell is dealing with in the moment of what's going on.
Okay, I'll overrule the objection.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Had you, I think the last question was, why was your schedule changing?
On Thursday, I was supposed to work for Stacy, but I had told her that I needed to go to the chiropractor, which I normally went to in McClenny. They didn't have any availability, so I called the one in Jacksonville and Oakleaf, and their first availability was at 10. So I told her I could come afterwards if she needed me to, and she said no, that it was okay. Her mother was coming to take care of the kids.
Were you physically in pain at that point?
I hurt, yes, ma'am, but I mean, it wasn't nothing that.
Did that pain interfere with your ability to take care of the children?
Oh no, ma'am. I just needed to be. I call it manipulate my hip. My hip and shoulder was bothering me.
And just to be clear, you didn't usually keep Aria on Thursday.
No, ma'am.
Okay. After you were scheduled to be off of work on Thursday, had you worked, did you have any other plans?
We were supposed to leave on vacation that Thursday afternoon.
So backing up to this July 19th date, you have gone to Stacy's house. You've walked inside and had this conversation with her. How long would you say you talked to Stacy before she left?
Give or take 2, 3, 4 minutes.
And did Stacy actually leave to go to work?
Yes, ma'am.
And what did you do then?
I had texted Brooke and told Brooke that Stacy had just left to go to work.
And the text message, I believe, said,
Just left.
shocker, just left,
Right.
shocker. What did you mean by that?
Because Stacy would ask me to come to work, sometimes be there at 8:15. She wouldn't leave till 8:30. She would say she was on her way home, or I'll be home at 4:30. She would be there till 5. So that was a little, that's what that was about.
And you and Brooke had discussed those particular issues in the past.
Yes, ma'am.
So you texted Brooke that Stacy had left, and at that point, were the boys up, the twins?
They weren't up. They were up, I would say, within 2 to 3 minutes of me being there.
Okay, so within 2 to 3 minutes of you getting there and getting settled, the boys got up?
Yes, ma'am.
What did you guys do then?
One of them got up and noticed that I was there, and of course, rah-rah, and he said, "Will you rub my back?" So I sat on the couch and I rubbed his back, and a few minutes later, the other one got up, and I would sit on the couch and I would rub their backs, and just engaging with them, and they were very loving children, so they wanted to engage.
Shortly after that, would you have prepared them breakfast that day?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you actually give them breakfast that day?
Yes, ma'am.
As the day goes along, what are you guys doing?
They have a little magnetic kind of toy that you can put together, it's like a puzzle type thing, but it's magnetic, and we'd sit on the floor and play with it, do a puzzle on the table, go to the toy room and play.
Were there ever times that you were on your phone with the children?
Yes, ma'am. We would watch TikTok together, just funny kids TikToks, stuff like that.
Fast forward to around 1 o'clock, 1:15. Do you recall Brooke arriving at the house?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Can you tell us what you were doing before you became aware that Miss Brooke Page was at the house? Immediately before.
I was preparing lunch for the kids
Where would you have been doing that?
in the kitchen.
And as you were preparing lunch for the children, where are they?
They're in the kitchen with me as well.
And what are you guys doing as you're cooking lunch?
We were singing, and then one wanted a hot dog, and one wanted French fries, and one wanted, strawberries and one wanted grapes and one wanted a juice. And so they were very hands-on but different and rambunctious. So I was preparing all of their meals. So I had French fries on the stove frying, and I had a hot dog in the microwave, and, you know, trying to get all of that juice made for them. And
Was all of that going on whenever you received the phone call from Brooke?
yes, ma'am.
Prior to receiving the phone call from Brooke Page, had you heard anyone knocking on the door?
No, ma'am, I didn't.
Did you hear the doorbell at all?
Ma'am?
Did you hear the doorbell at all?
No, ma'am.
Whenever Brooke Page called you, can you describe for us what happened?
She said, hey, and I said, hey, and she said, she said, I'm here, and I said, here? I said, where are you at? And she said, I'm at the door, and I said, oh, and
Did you go to the door at that time?
I did, but I didn't know why she was there, so I was like, what are you doing? And she said, I'm here, and so I asked her where she was at, and she said, I'm at the door.
Did you go to the front door?
I did.
What happened when you opened the front door?
She opened up the door, and I seen her, and I was still in shock while she was there. And so she had money in her hand and her keys. And that's when I realized I didn't get the baby in the car. I forgot the baby in the car. And so I pushed her out the way. And I was screaming, oh my God, Brooke, oh my God, oh my God, Brooke. And I could hear her saying, what? And I ran to the car. And I opened up the door, and she was still there. Aria was still in the back seat.
What happened after you opened the door, Rhonda?